My name is Krix, and I used to think humans were the galaxy's biggest joke. 3 limbs short of a decent species, no natural armor, and they die if you look at them wrong. But after what happened on Nexus Prime, well, let's just say I sleep with 17 locks on my door now. It started like any other Tuesday. I was manning the communication array on Station Omega 7, sipping my morning stimulant brew and complaining about the terrible reception we'd been getting from the outer sectors. The humans had been babbling about some routine mining operation on Nexus Prime for weeks. Routine. Right. Because nothing involving humans is ever routine. Krix. Captain Martinez burst through my quarters like a hurricane made of caffeine and bad decisions. We've got a problem. I nearly spilled my brew all over my control panel. What now? Did Thompson try to pet another carnivorous plant? Martinez's face was pale, which for a human meant something was seriously wrong. We've lost contact with the mining team on Nexus Prime. Last transmission was disturbing. Now, I've been working with humans for 3 cycles, and I've learned that when they say something is disturbing, it usually means grab your best weapon and pray to whatever deity you worship. But mining operations? How dangerous could rock collection be? What kind of disturbing are we talking about? I asked, already reaching for my emergency kit. Martinez activated the holo display, and suddenly my quarters filled with static and the desperate voice of Jake Morrison, the mining team leader. This is Morrison to Station Omega 7. We've breached something down here. It's not a natural cave system. The walls, they're moving. And there's something else down here with us. The transmission cut to screaming. Then silence. Well, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, that's definitely not routine. Within an hour, we were loading into the transport ship Defiant. The crew was a mixed bag of humans and a few other species brave enough or stupid enough to volunteer. There was Dr. Elena Vasquez, the team medic who could patch up anything short of complete disintegration. Sergeant Mike O'Brien, who treated his plasma rifle like a beloved pet. And then there was Lisa Park, the engineer who could fix anything with enough time and inappropriate language. The journey to Nexus Prime took 6 hours. 6 hours of humans doing what they do best, making jokes in the face of impending doom, checking their weapons obsessively, and consuming alarming amounts of that liquid poison they call coffee. So, Krix, O'Brien said, polishing his rifle for the 15th time. What's your species' record for running away from dangerous situations? We prefer the term tactical retreat, I replied, and we're very good at it. We've survived 3 galactic wars by being excellent at not being where the fighting was. Smart, Park laughed, rewiring something that probably shouldn't be rewired. Humans have survived by being too stupid to know when to run. Its statement would prove more prophetic than any of us realized. Nexus Prime was a mining world, all red rock and industrial facilities scattered across its surface like metal tumors. The mining operation was located in the northern continent, where the geological surveys had indicated rich deposits of rare minerals. What they hadn't indicated was that something else was already living there. We landed near the mining facility as the planet's twin suns were setting, casting everything in an eerie orange glow. The place looked deserted, but in that specific way that suggests everyone left in a hurry and probably screaming. Equipment still running, Vasquez observed, checking her scanner. Life support systems are active, but I'm not detecting any human life signs. What about non-human life signs? Martinez asked. Vasquez's face went pale. That's the problem. I'm detecting lots of non-human life signs. Moving. Underground. We entered the facility through the main airlock, weapons drawn and nerves stretched tighter than a Regellian's purse strings. The interior was a mess of overturned furniture, scattered equipment, and what looked like claw marks on the walls. Okay, O'Brien muttered. This is officially creepy, you think? Park shot back. The giant claw marks didn't give it away. The facility's main shaft descended 300 meters into the planet's crust. The elevator was still functioning, which was either a good sign or a trap. With humans, it's often both. Motion sensors indicate something large moving in the lower levels, Martinez reported. Multiple somethings. Define large, I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Bigger than us. Significantly bigger. The elevator descended in uncomfortable silence, broken only by the mechanical humming of machinery and the occasional nervous joke from one of the humans. I was starting to understand why my species had developed such excellent running abilities. Level 1 was empty. Level 2 showed signs of hasty evacuation. Level 3 was where things got interesting. Blood, Vasquez announced, kneeling beside a dark stain on the floor. Human blood. Fresh. How fresh? Martinez asked. Hours, maybe less. That's when we heard it. A sound like grinding stone mixed with something organic and wet. It echoed up from the depths of the facility, reverberating through the metal walls like the planet itself was digesting something. Well, O'Brien said, checking his weapon's charge. That's not ominous at all. Park had moved to a computer terminal and was accessing the facility's logs. I'm pulling up the last recorded data. Mining team was working on level 7 when they broke through into some kind of natural chamber. Initial scans showed it was much larger than expected. How much larger? I asked. Tri-cathedral-sized. And here's the interesting part. The chamber walls show signs of artificial construction. This wasn't natural. Martinez frowned. Artificial? Built by whom? That's what they went down to find out. The elevator continued its descent. Level 4. Level 5. The sounds from below were getting louder, more numerous. Whatever was down there, it wasn't alone. I'm detecting elevated temperature readings from level 7, Vasquez reported, and increased seismic activity. Seismic activity? I asked. As in earthquakes? As in something very large moving around down there. Level 6 was when the smell hit us. It was indescribable, like rotting vegetation mixed with ozone and something that might have been sulfur. Or fear. Fear has a smell, and it was thick in the air. Breathing apparatus. Everyone, Martinez ordered, and stay close. We activated our environmental suits and stepped off the elevator at level 7. The mining facility's lowest level was a disaster zone. Equipment was scattered everywhere, some of it looking like it had been crushed by something with incredible strength. The walls were covered in more of those claw marks, and sections of the floor had been torn up as if something had been digging. But it was the hole in the far wall that caught our attention. It was massive, easily 10 meters across, and it opened into darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. The chamber, Park said unnecessarily. Morrison's team went in there? I asked. According to the logs, they established a perimeter and sent in a scouting party. That was 4 hours ago. Martinez made a decision that would haunt me for the rest of my considerably shortened life expectancy. We're going in. Are you insane? I hissed. This is exactly the kind of situation where intelligent species turn around and call for backup. We are the backup, O'Brien pointed out. Besides, there might be survivors. There might be things that eat survivors, but humans, as I've learned, have a unique relationship with common sense. They acknowledge it exists, then proceed to ignore it completely. We entered the chamber. The first thing that struck me was the size. Park hadn't been exaggerating. It was cathedral-sized, with walls that stretched up beyond the range of our lights. But these weren't natural cave walls. They were smooth, almost organic-looking, with a pattern of ridges and grooves that looked disturbingly like veins. This is definitely artificial, Vasquez whispered, but the construction doesn't match any known species. Maybe it's older than any known species, Martinez suggested. That's when we found the first body. Jake Morrison was pinned to the wall about 20 meters from the entrance, held there by what looked like organic webbing. His mining suit was torn open, but he was still alive, barely. Morrison. Martinez rushed to him. What happened? Where's the rest of your team? Morrison's eyes were wide with terror. They came up from below. Moving through the walls, we tried to fight them. But they're too fast, too smart. What are they? Vasquez asked, scanning him with her medical equipment. I don't know. But they're old. Very old, and they're hungry. That's when the walls started moving. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. The vein-like patterns seemed to pulse, creating shadows that shifted and flowed. But then I realized the shadows were moving independently of our lights. Guys? Park's voice was tight with fear. We need to leave. Now, but it was too late. The chamber was coming alive around us, and we were about to learn why humans have such a reputation for being terrifyingly stubborn in the face of impossible odds. The things that emerged from the walls were nightmares given form. They were tall, maybe 3 meters, with limbs that seemed to shift between solid and liquid. Their skin was dark and reflective, like wet obsidian, and they moved with a fluid grace that made my survival instinct scream. Contact. O'Brien shouted, raising his rifle. Multiple contacts. The first creature lunged at Martinez with inhuman speed. The captain dodged, drawing his sidearm and firing 3 quick shots. The plasma bolts struck the creature's center mass, and it laughed, actually laughed. A sound like glass breaking in reverse. Energy weapons aren't effective. Martinez yelled, switched to kinetic. Park pulled out what looked like an ancient projectile weapon, something that belonged in a museum rather than a combat situation. Good thing I brought Old Reliable. The sound of gunfire filled the chamber as the humans opened fire with their backup weapons. The creatures seemed more affected by the kinetic rounds, but they were still moving, still attacking. There are too many of them. Vasquez shouted, helping Morrison down from the wall. We need to retreat. But the entrance was blocked. More creatures were emerging from the walls, cutting off our escape route. We were trapped in an ancient chamber with things that shouldn't exist, and the humans were doing what humans do best in impossible situations. They were getting angry. You know what? O'Brien snarled, reloading his projectile weapon. I'm getting really tired of being scared today. That's when I witnessed something that would forever change my understanding of what it means to be human. They stopped retreating. They stopped being afraid. They became something else entirely. Something terrifying. Martinez grabbed a mining tool, some kind of plasma cutter, and modified it into a weapon. Park jury-rigged an explosive device from mining charges. Vasquez turned her medical supplies into chemical weapons, and they fought back. Not with the desperate flailing of prey animals, but with the calculated fury of apex predators who had just remembered what they were capable of. The creatures, ancient and terrible as they were, seemed genuinely surprised by this development. They had probably been the dominant species on this world for millions of years, and suddenly these small, soft creatures were not just fighting back, but winning. Krix. Martinez shouted over the sound of battle, the mining equipment. Can you activate the seismic charges? I looked at the control panel he was pointing to, then at the creatures swarming around us. That will bring down the entire chamber. Good, do it. We'll be buried alive. Better than being eaten alive. This was human logic at its finest. When faced with certain death, choose the more explosive option. I activated the seismic charges. The chamber began to shake, dust and debris falling from the walls as the explosives detonated in sequence. The creatures seemed to understand what was happening, because they became even more aggressive, attacking with desperate fury. But the humans held their ground. They formed a defensive circle around Morrison and myself, covering each other with a precision that spoke of natural instinct rather than training. They were protecting their pack, and they would die before letting anything through. The ceiling began to collapse just as the last of the creatures fell. Martinez grabbed Morrison under one arm and me under the other, and we ran for the entrance as the ancient chamber came down around us. We made it to the elevator just as the support beams gave way. The entire level 7 collapsed, sealing whatever remained of those things beneath tons of rock and twisted metal. As we rode the elevator back to the surface, I looked at the humans around me. They were battered, exhausted, and covered in dust and worse things, but they were alive. And they had won. So, O'Brien said. Breaking the silence, anyone else think that was fun? Park laughed. Actually laughed. Fun? Mike, we almost died. Almost doesn't count. That's when I realized something that would change my perspective on humans forever. They weren't just brave or stupid or stubborn. They were predators. They were predators, apex predators who had spent millions of years clawing their way to the top of their food chain, and some ancient monsters in a cave weren't going to change that. But as we reached the surface and saw the stars appearing in the darkening sky, I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't seen the last of those creatures. The chamber had been vast, and we had only collapsed a small section of it. Something told me our fight was just beginning, and despite everything I had just witnessed, despite the terror and the near-death experience, I found myself looking forward to it, because I had learned something about humans that day. When they fight beside you, you're never really alone, and when they fight against you, you're already dead. The return journey to Station Omega 7 was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that comes before storms. We had survived our first encounter with the creatures, but Morrison's words kept echoing in my mind. They're old, very old. And they're hungry. How old? How hungry? And most importantly, how many more of them were down there? As I settled into my quarters and began writing my report, I realized that our little mining operation had just become something much bigger. We had awakened something that had been sleeping for millennia, and it was not happy about being disturbed. The humans were already planning their next move, because that's what humans do. They don't just survive, they adapt, they overcome, and they make sure the threat is eliminated. I poured myself a drink and settled in to watch them work. After all, I had learned that being on the human side was the safest place in the galaxy, even if it was also the most terrifying. 3 days after our escape from Nexus Prime, I thought the nightmare was over. I was wrong. Dead wrong. The first sign something was amiss came when Morrison started screaming in the medical bay. Not the normal kind of screaming you'd expect from someone who'd been webbed to a wall by ancient horrors. This was different. This was the sound of someone whose mind was being rewritten from the inside out. What's happening to him? Martinez demanded as Dr. Vasquez sedated Morrison for the 4th time that day. I don't know, she admitted, checking her readings. His brain activity is off the charts. It's like something is trying to communicate with him. Communicate? I asked, though I already suspected I didn't want to know the answer or control him. That evening, Morrison broke out of the medical bay. Security footage showed him walking through 3 locked doors as if they weren't there, his movements jerky and unnatural. He made it to the communication array before O'Brien found him. Morrison was trying to send a signal. O'Brien reported to our emergency meeting. Long-range transmission, directed at Nexus Prime. A signal saying what? Park asked. Coordinates. Station Omega 7's exact location. The silence that followed was the kind that precedes either brilliant plans or spectacular disasters. With humans, it's usually both. So Martinez said finally they're coming here. Appears that way. O'Brien confirmed. The good news is we have about 18 hours before they arrive. How is that good news? I demanded, because it gives us time to prepare a proper welcome. That's when I realized something about humans that still gives me nightmares. They don't just fight back when cornered. They actively seek out ways to make the fight more dangerous for everyone involved. We're not running? I asked hopefully. Where would we run to? Martinez replied, these things are old, probably spread across multiple worlds. If we don't stop them here, they'll just follow us wherever we go. So we make our stand, Park said, cracking her knuckles. I like it. You like it? I squeaked. We barely survived one encounter with a handful of them. That's because we were playing defense, O'Brien explained. Defense is for species that want to survive. We're going to do something much more interesting, which is, we're going to make them extinct. The next 18 hours were a masterclass in human ingenuity applied to creative destruction. Park turned the station's mining equipment into weapons of mass annihilation. Vasquez synthesized chemical compounds that would make a plague jealous. Martinez coordinated with nearby military outposts, calling in favors that probably violated several galactic treaties. And O'Brien? O'Brien did something that still makes my species' survival instincts curl up in a corner and whimper. He studied the enemy. They're not just ancient, he explained, showing us his analysis. They're a hive mind. Each individual creature is connected to the collective consciousness. That's how they coordinate so well. So we're facing a unified intelligence with millions of years of experience? I asked. Exactly. But that's also their weakness. How is that a weakness? O'Brien smiled. And it was the kind of smile that made me understand why humans had conquered their homeworld. Because hive minds think like hive minds. They expect enemies to behave rationally, to follow predictable patterns. They've never encountered anything like us. You mean suicidally insane? I prefer creatively unpredictable. The creatures arrived exactly 18 hours later, just as Morrison had calculated. They came in ships that looked like they'd been grown rather than built, organic curves and surfaces that pulsed with their own inner light. Beautiful and terrifying, like everything else about them. 27 ships, Martinez reported from the command center, each one about the size of a small moon. Small moons? I gasped. How many of them are there? Sensors indicate approximately 50,000 creatures per ship. I did the math and immediately wished I hadn't. That's over 1 million of them. Sounds about right, O'Brien said cheerfully. This should be fun. The first wave hit our outer defenses like a tsunami of claws and ancient fury. The creatures moved through space without suits, apparently immune to vacuum, radiation, and common sense. They swarmed over our automated defense platforms, tearing them apart with casual efficiency. Outer perimeter is down, Martinez announced. They're heading for the main station. Let them come, Park said from her position at the modified mining controls. I've got a surprise waiting. The surprise was a gravitational mining beam repurposed into a weapon that could crush matter at the molecular level. When the first wave of creatures hit it, they simply ceased to exist, not vaporized, not destroyed, just removed from reality. The hive mind's reaction was immediate and visceral. The remaining creatures stopped their advance, hovering in space as if confused. They'd never encountered anything that could simply delete their kind from existence. They're regrouping, Vasquez reported, trying to understand what just happened. Good, Martinez said. That means they're thinking like individuals instead of a collective. O'Brien, initiate Phase 2. Phase 2 was where things got truly terrifying, not for us, but for creatures that had ruled the galaxy before humans learned to make fire. O'Brien had prepared something special. Using data from Morrison's brief mental connection, he'd created a virus, not a biological virus, but something far more insidious. It's a mental virus, designed to spread through the hive mind's collective consciousness. It's simple, he explained as he activated the transmission. Every thought they share, every piece of information they pass between themselves carries the virus. And what does the virus do? It makes them think like humans. The effect was immediate and chaos incarnate. The creature's perfect coordination collapsed as individual units began making independent, irrational decisions. Some attacked their own ships. Others flew off in random directions. A few actually started fighting among themselves. They're going crazy, I observed. No, O'Brien corrected. They're going human. For a species that's existed as a collective consciousness for millions of years, individual thought is the ultimate madness. But the hive mind was ancient and adaptable. It began purging the infected units, cutting them off from the collective to prevent the virus from spreading further. The remaining creatures, maybe half their original number, resumed their attack with renewed fury. They're angry now, Martinez noted as the creatures smashed through our secondary defenses. Really angry. Angry is good, Park said, charging her next weapon. Angry makes mistakes. The creatures broke through our hull in 17 different places, pouring into the station like a flood of nightmares. But this time, we were ready for them. The corridors had been turned into kill zones. Every intersection, every doorway, every ventilation shaft was rigged with weapons, traps, and surprises that would make a sadist proud. The creatures found themselves fighting not just humans, but human ingenuity applied to the art of creative murder. They're learning our tactics, Vasquez reported from her position, adapting to our weapons. Then we changed tactics, Martinez replied. Park, activate the nuclear option. Which nuclear option? Park asked. We have 6 different ones, all of them. Yeah, I've seen many things in my time working with humans, but nothing prepared me for what they unleashed in those corridors. Plasma weapons that burned at the temperature of stars, gravity bombs that created miniature black holes, chemical weapons that turned matter into its component atoms, and through it all, the humans fought with a calm, methodical efficiency that was more terrifying than any rage. They weren't just defending their home. They were exterminating a species, and they were enjoying it. Krix, Martinez called out as we fell back to the command center. Can you access the station's main reactor? Yes, but why would I want to? Because we're going to turn this entire station into a bomb. Of course they were. Because when faced with an unstoppable enemy, the human solution is always to become an unstoppable explosion. The reactor overload would take 30 minutes to reach critical mass, 30 minutes to evacuate the station and get to minimum safe distance. 30 minutes to watch a million-year-old species learn why humans are the galaxy's apex predators. Evacuation pods are ready, Vasquez reported. All personnel accounted for. What about Morrison? I asked. Still in the medical bay, O'Brien said, still connected to their hive mind. We can't leave him. We're not going to, Martinez said. But we're not taking him with us either. That's when I learned about the final phase of their plan. Morrison, still linked to the hive mind, would be the delivery system for one last gift. O'Brien had prepared something special, a concentrated dose of human psychological warfare that would spread through the collective consciousness like wildfire. What is it? I asked. Fear, O'Brien replied. Pure, concentrated human fear. The kind that comes from knowing you're about to die and there's nothing you can do about it. That's horrible. That's the point. These creatures have never experienced individual fear. They've never felt helpless, never faced their own mortality. We're going to teach them. The evacuation pods launched just as the reactor reached critical mass. As we flew away from Station Omega-7, I watched the explosion through the rear viewports. It was beautiful and terrible. A miniature star being born in the void. The shockwave caught the creatures' ships, tearing them apart like paper, but more importantly, it caught their minds. Through Morrison's connection, every creature in the collective experienced the fear of impending death, the horror of individual extinction. They broke. A species that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years, that had survived ice ages and cosmic disasters, that had conquered death itself, was destroyed by the simple human emotion of fear. Is it over? I asked as we watched the last of their ships drift away, powerless and abandoned. For now, Martinez said. But there might be others on other worlds, so what do we do? O'Brien smiled that terrible human smile. We hunt them down. All of them. Every last one. That could take years. Decades. So, we're humans. We're persistent. That was 3 months ago. Since then, we've visited 17 worlds, found 12 more hive colonies, and exterminated every single one. The humans have turned it into a science, a systematic elimination of a species that once considered itself immortal. They call it the Great Cleansing, and they speak of it with the same casual tone they use to discuss the weather. Another hive world discovered in the Rigel system, Park announced during our morning briefing. Estimated population, 3 million. Excellent, Martinez replied. We'll hit them next Tuesday. Should we try communication first? I suggested. Maybe they'll surrender? The humans looked at me like I'd suggested they try breathing vacuum. Krix, O'Brien said patiently. These things tried to eat us. They made it personal. So we're committing genocide? We're pest control. Martinez corrected. There's a difference. What's the difference? Guests don't get to negotiate. And that's how I learned the most important lesson about humans. They don't just fight for survival. They fight for dominance. They fight until there's nothing left to fight against. The ancient creatures that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years lasted exactly 4 months against humanity's focused attention. 4 months to go from apex predator to extinct species. Now, as I sit in my quarters aboard the human warship Retribution, I often wonder what would have happened if those creatures had simply left us alone. If they had stayed in their caves, content with their ancient slumber. But they didn't. They woke up hungry and found humans in their way. Big mistake. The humans are already talking about their next project, something about securing the galaxy against future threats and establishing humanity as the dominant species. They speak of it with the same casual confidence they used to discuss exterminating a million-year-old civilization. I pour myself a drink and settle in to watch them work. After all, I've learned that being on the human side is the safest place in the galaxy, even if it's also the most terrifying. Because I've seen what happens when humans stop playing defense and start playing offense. I've watched them turn fear into a weapon and extinction into an art form. And I've learned that the scariest thing in the galaxy isn't ancient horrors or cosmic disasters or unstoppable plagues. The scariest thing in the galaxy is a human who's decided that something needs to die. Everything else is just details.